Good morning. This is Barry O'Connell, and I'm very pleased to have a very special friend and one of the most knowledgeable people I know on politics, particularly Maryland politics. How's it going, Lynn?
Very good morning, sir, and thank you for having me, and thank you for the very kind comments. You are far too kind, but it is appreciated.
So, what's going on this weekend? Are you kicking back and enjoying the post post victory time?
Getting some rest and relaxation. This is kind of a time post-primary prior to the real beginning of the fall campaign. It's a good time just to relax a little bit, take a deep breath. Spent Saturday in Annapolis checking out some galleries, looking for some fresh pieces of art. And even hit one of my favorite breweries, Firm Brewing in Gambles. So life was pretty good, and I'm now refreshed and ready to get back into campaign overdrive. Looks like I'm gonna be doing some work on behalf of Dan Schwartz, the candidate in Maryland's first congressional district, who is launching a campaign, who has launched a very effective, well-financed, highly organized campaign to take on Andy Harris in the first.
I think you could do wonders on that campaign. I know Dan is one of my big fans. I know he always says nice things about me. So I'm looking forward to you getting him into office. Of course,
Well, no.
that's
So one person. So I don't want to oversell my role. He has a very good team, and I look forward to coming in and kind of being a an asset to his campaign organization. I think I think what we have to remember is just how idiosyncratic the first congressional district is. It is a it is a geographically expansive landmass. I mean, coming as it is from Somerset County to the deep south and lower Worcester County, all the way up the spine of the Eastern Shore, down the 95 corridor and well into Baltimore County. So it is an enormous district, and with that geographic expansiveness comes a political diversity that you don't get in many other districts. And so it really does become incumbent upon the candidate in the campaign to avoid running a standardized national Democratic campaign against a conservative Republican opponent. You have to speak to the issues that are very specific to the very diverse orientation of the district. And I think that's where some previous Democratic campaigns have fallen short. We've tried to nationalize an approach to a very quirky, exceptional district.
okay. I'm the first congressional district always strikes me as, and I'm going to say this as an outsider, and I hope I don't insult too many of them, but I always get the feeling that in Maryland politics, they have a chip on their shoulder that, that they look at the rest of the state as if they're somehow being dismissed or being written off or being not taken seriously, that people don't on the Western Shore. Um, we don't always understand their issues and their problems, and we want to apply, um, a Bethesda, Chevy Chase solution to a place that is so completely different.
I
That
completely agree. And Barry, they do have a chip on their shoulder, and they have every right to have a chip on their shoulder. And so if I may just take a moment to unpack my statement that, for decades, the first district really was a model for a moderate temperament. Maryland is described as a state of middle temperament, and I think that was embodied by the political sensibilities of the first congressional district, as it was organized from through the 50s, 60s, well, and up to 1990. You had the Eastern Shore, which was conjoined by a body of water to the southern Maryland counties, Calvert, Charles, St. Mary's. And so it was a type of district that was a slight Democratic, lean back in those days, but we had moderate Democrats like Roy Dyson who gave way to a decidedly moderate Republican in Wayne Gilchrist. So in 1992, right after Gilchrist was just elected, for reasons that had nothing to do with the first district, CD1 was put into the same district as there was an overlay between CD1 and CD4, which meant that Tom McMillan, the Democratic congressman from the time from Anne Arundel County, was paired with Wayne Gilchrist. And that yielded a district that went up the spine of Southern Maryland was thrown away, was put into Steny Hoyer's district where it remains today. And it went up the spine of I-97 and Route 2 Ritchie Highway to take in most of Anne Arundel County, most of the North County, and into Baltimore City, hitting Baltimore Peninsula communities like Curtis Bay, Brooklyn, Hawkins Point. And that was a district that no longer connected communities of shared interest. And so that it yielded some very odd nominees that really didn't reflect the character of the district. And then in 2011, as you know, Barry, because we've discussed this for so long, so many times, the shore was essentially packed with Republicans so that we could turn a 6-2 state into a 7-1 congressional state in order to make CD6 the district represented at the time by Roscoe Bartlett, a Democratic lean. We had to put the Republicans somewhere, so we packed the first district, and that's how we got not only a Republican, but also one with the MAGA credentials of Andy Harris. And I would suggest that that has worked well for absolutely nobody, least of
Mhm.
all the residents of the first district who have suffered due to his utter inattentiveness to our needs and priorities.
I can see that. I think sometimes we can be a little bit dismissive about the needs of the Eastern Shore, and I think that's a bad idea. Um, so, what's different this time? How does your candidate? Where does he stand on things that make him possibility?
So I think it's not only a question, Barry, of where he stands on issues, it is the tone and the cadence with which he's talking about issues, and it's the issues that he chooses to prioritize. He is focused squarely to the point of exclusivity on policies that will put more money back into the pockets of the first district consumer. This is an affordability election. Barry, you have written with such eloquence and persuasiveness on this over the course of this primary season, while there have been candidates, say, in places like District 5, that have used their candidacies as a platform from which to talk about divisive cultural issues and to get into insider baseball about who is funding which campaigns and which PACs are putting the most money into the campaign through dark money and everything. Dan Schwartz recognizes that at day's end, this race is about affordability of energy, affordability of housing, affordability of daily goods and services, affordability of college and retirement. And if his policy prescriptions don't fit into that framework, chances are you're not going to hear much about it from Dan Schwartz. Let Andy Harris prosecute the culture wars. Let Andy Harris be a servile dog to Donald Trump and the MAGA movement. Dan Schwartz is going to be an independent voice for the families who are struggling economically to make ends meet.
I suppose I should make one small bow of the head to the culture warriors. Um, the two leading gay politicians in the country have died about a month apart. Um, we had Barney Frank die about a month ago, and Barney was the first congressman to be openly gay. And then we had last night, we lost Lindsey Graham in South Carolina as the president's best friend, confidant, possible bedmate, as the leading gay Republican senator that I ever remember. I mean, I'm sure there's been others, but um, it those culture war points that used to be so important, nobody seems to really care about. When a gay man can win the Republican Senate seat from South Carolina, um, it's a bigger shock than a gay man winning a seat in Massachusetts, like Barney Frank did. But I think the country's changing. Do you think I'm right in that? Do you see that?
I do. I think the country is. I think in many cases the party or the country is stagnant or going backward, and in other areas I think the country is moving forward. And uh, I look at the Lindsey Graham thing. I've had several people text or call me this morning saying, "Hey, what do you think about Lindsey Graham's passing, and what do you think about how it affects Republican politics? Does it have a policy impact?" And my answer has been twofold. Regardless of how I feel about Lindsey Graham's politics and the way he chose to go about his life in public service, anytime someone dies, it's a sad event,
Mhm.
with very few exceptions. And I want to be respectful of Senator Graham's family, friends, those who loved him. Um, I wish them peace over the coming weeks as they come to terms with his loss. As far as policy impacts, I think it means absolutely nothing. Uh, there are those who I've seen in kind of the early feedback loop say, well, that Lindsey Graham his passage could presage a difference in approach to Ukraine, or it could mean a change in the party's relationship with Israel. I don't believe that. I think those policy prescriptions, are dominated and driven by Donald Trump and his administration. Nothing will happen in the Senate. The Senate has been highly obsequious to this president when Lindsey Graham was alive. It will be highly obsequious and deferential to the point of pathos now that he is gone. And that will not change based on whoever fills his seat.
My first reaction was, does this give the Democrat in South Carolina an edge? And I'm not sure it does because I think sometimes the death of a candidate tends to strengthen whoever replaces them. I mean, we'll see. We'll see what they have to say. We'll see how it shakes out. But I don't think we're going to see a South Carolinian Democratic senator anytime soon.
No, I don't think so either, Barry. It's a deep red state, ruby red, which if I can just take a rhetorical side lane here, which always made it silly to me that we would choose to make South Carolina, of all states, the first in the nation primary. We have no hope of recapturing South Carolina in a general election. So why, other than the fact that it had a short-term political benefit for Joe Biden, which is obviously why we did it, it did nothing to bolster the Democratic Party. So I agree. It's not going to benefit the Democratic candidate in the fall. Fritz Hollings is not walking through that door anytime soon. And the South Carolina Senate delegation will be red for the foreseeable future.
I think one of the things, the reason why it's up front is because they wanted a state that would give Black voters a chance to test their likes and dislikes. And the Democratic primary in South Carolina is 50 to 55% Democratic, Black. So it's a huge Black vote. And, you know, what happens to any of these candidates? I mean, Kamala Harris is coming down here to campaign. Um, how does she do? How does a majority Black Democratic primary see her? How do they see Pritzker and Andy Bashir, and how do they see so many of the others? Um, does does Pete, former Secretary Pete, get much of a ride there? I mean, he's going to do very well in heavily white states like Iowa and New Hampshire, which are both over 88% white. But it is a Black test. Now, I will mention that Maryland's hero, our own Westmore, will be down here fighting in the 116th district first thing Monday morning and
I read
spending the
that through
day.
Barry O'Connell's page.
Yeah, he's down here with Clay Middleton to see if they can shake things up. It would not hurt to elevate some candidates in Jim Clyburn's district. He's 85 years old. There's got to be a successor. So if they could elevate his longtime um, uh, aide, Lieutenant Colonel Clay Middleton, um, he could be the next man after Clyburn in that district. That is likely. Um, it'll be good to have the governor down here visiting South Carolina. So we'll see what happens. But
Well,
I
Barry,
think
I just
now
my question for you, Barry, is when the governor is in South Carolina, is he going to pay you a visit? I mean, I think that the relationship between candidates and who come to South Carolina and you, it's kind of analogous to that of when Democratic candidates in years gone by would venture to Louisville, they'd have to pay a visit to Barry Bingham, the legendary publisher of Louisville's biggest newspaper and a kingmaker in national Democratic politics. I would think that as part of his itinerary in South Carolina, he should spend a few minutes touching base with you.
I would respectfully say that I am very, very low on the West list. I mean, it just I
Well, you
am
shouldn't
not
be.
going to get. Um, I'm spoiled because for years um, I followed Peter Franchot, and Peter and I had a close relationship, about as close as either of us ever wanted to have. Peter gave me his cell phone number, and I talked to him once or twice a year. I didn't call him every week. I didn't call him every Sunday morning. I didn't pester the guy. Once or twice a year, Peter and I would talk. We'd have a good conversation, and that would be it. But I felt close. He felt close, and we worked well together. Then I get to Wes, who doesn't even give me a Christmas card or an invitation to the cattle call type events where everybody gets invited except for me. So I'm not, it's a small petty thing on my part, but I sort of missed the closeness I had. But see, with Peter, Peter had the best chief of staff of anybody in Annapolis. I mean, that guy Foxwell was a true master of understanding the power of social media in a way that I don't think many people do. I mean, I get messages back from people who say, my candidate's all excited. He read his name in the newspaper. No newspaper wrote about whoever it is we're talking about. I wrote about him. I'm the newspaper for thousands and thousands of people. Do you realize I've gotten over 1 million visits to everybody's Maryland politics in the last 60 days? I mean, that's not too shabby. On a strictly
It's pretty
political site,
remarkable.
um, I have probably more political news than any of maybe all of them except for possibly Maryland Matters. Um, more than the Baltimore Sun, the Baltimore Banner, the Capital, the Washington Post. So sooner or later, they're going to realize I matter. But at this point, not yet. Certainly not yet.
Barry, this is the first time in a very long time that I'm going to disagree with you because I would suggest to you and to your viewers of 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 which there are so many thousands upon thousands that they already know that you matter. I get the calls. I get calls from political leaders, political insiders, and influencers who 5 years ago wouldn't even admit to logging on and reading your content, who are now saying, how do you think this is going to play with Barry O'Connell? Do you think Barry O'Connell will write about this? Do you think that he would give me a little bit of a rub to give me a head, to give me a leg up? People who may not even be reaching out to you are acutely aware of who you are and the role that you play in Maryland's political ecosystem. I assure you of that. And it's really a remarkable reflection of the epoch in which we live that as as we have more means of communication than ever before, including the entirety of human understanding in this little device, people are less informed about their political system and about their political leaders than ever before because our traditional legacy media outlets have surrendered to the economics of the age. It's no longer profitable. It doesn't generate the same margins to deliver the quality of coverage that they did in years gone by. And so as those local papers go fall by the wayside, as local and regional media broadcast outlets scale back their coverage, people are still hungry and they're increasingly turning to you as an avenue of first resort, and you have stepped up, I would suggest, to meet the moment. And yeah, I don't want anybody watching this today to even question for a second your influence, Barry, in our political system. It's influential and it is positive.
Thank you. One of the things I would say is that, um, I used to buy newspaper advertising for a national company. I worked for the ad agency that handled, as we called it, the outdoor power industry. So one week we're buying full page spreads for Cub Cadet. The next week we're buying for Steel Chainsaw. We're buying for all the big boys. Remember when you used to see giant 1 and 2 page ads for all the like the tractor companies, the chainsaw
Oh,
companies, all
sure.
that? We used to buy that, and I remember negotiating with the Baltimore Sun, um, where we said to them, we can buy you at our price. And it was always at our price. We were always negotiating price. Or we can get the same coverage from these five other newspapers. Then we list off the five other newspapers, and they knew that the five other newspapers gave them the same footprint as the Baltimore Sun did back in its heyday. Okay. Well, the difference is there aren't five other newspapers that hit the same market as the Baltimore Sun. Now we've got the Baltimore Banner coming on strong, but we've got a situation where, with fewer and fewer news sources, it's more important for the reporters to follow the press releases rather than the stories. So we get reporters who are doing basically press release reviews. I hate to pick on him. He's one of the truly great reporters of all times in the annals of Maryland journalism. But Josh Kurtz wrote a story this week about Chris Van Hollen, and he managed to do an entire interview without asking one tough question. He just basically hit Chris Van Hollen's press points. Um, Now maybe he figures that if he doesn't do it, somebody else will do that, and but we don't have the same vigorous press trying to chase down stories like we did 20 years ago.
That's
So
true.
I see that as a problem. I mean, it used to be the press broke stories. Now I break stories and they copy me, and I don't get mad at them about it. I'm not a reporter. Um, the thing that most people don't understand is I'm not a reporter. I don't pretend to be a journalist. I'm an even weirder category. I am an open source intelligence specialist, OSINT. And it's basically the same work I did on the Middle East and Southwest Asia for 30 years. You track every known fact about them and then plot them. That's what I do in Maryland politics. I track all the little bits and pieces and then put it together and come up with the stories. But enough about me. I think we're going into a stage where I'm already starting to write about the 30 elections. I think people are starting to line up and wonder who's going to be on top. Will West go for president? And I think he's going to go for president, but
I agree.
I think he's not running for president. But then America will just demand that he run, and he'll acquiesce to the will of the American people, something like that. I think that's great. I mean, nobody goes to the 116th district in South Carolina because they didn't have anything else to do on a Monday morning. So we're seeing this lining up. We see Brooke Learman crisscrossing the state, burning up tires, wearing out state police officers, zipping here and back and forth again, um, campaigning for governor. Um, People are kind of used to it because back in the days when you ran the comptroller's office, you ran things so well that it was sort of like, okay, Peter, get out of my hair, go do things, and I'll take care of. And you got the phone answered in under a minute, and you got the refunds out within 3 days, and everybody was happy. So he didn't have to go to the office. Brooke, on the other hand, doesn't answer the telephone. Her people don't answer the telephone, and they don't get the refunds out on time. So consequently, she's zipping across the state without a realization that the work's not getting done. Um, I mean, we're seeing things where things seem a little bit out of control. And the big question is, what's David Trone going to do next? It's
So
too
I think
late.
there's a lot. I think you're raising a lot of issues. First of all, I want to lend some context and clarity to my time as Peter's chief of staff. I would love to take credit for all the wonderful things that you have ascribed to the agency during our tenure, all of which are absolutely true. We did get refunds out within 3 business days. We did ensure that phone calls were answered ritualistically in less than a minute. We did safeguard the Maryland taxpayers, all 3.38 of them, 3.38 million of them from fraud and identity theft and predatory financial practices. I will say the best thing that I did was hire people who were smarter and better than I was and more knowledgeable than I was, give them the authority to move and then get out of their way. I mean, I will say that two of the best hires I ever made personally were Andrew Friedson and Manny Welsh. Manny Welsh, who is doing such a phenomenal job now, helping Lester Davis, run the state of Maryland from the second floor. He is just an organizational and an administrative savant. The way he can establish organizational goals and go forward and implement them. Manny is a special, and he's a special political athlete. And Andrew Friedson, I'm still struggling with the fact that he lost that race for Montgomery County Executive. He would have his combination of values, a proven record of success, a vision for where Montgomery County needs to be to compete with Fairfax and other jurisdictions in Northern Virginia. He would have been the engine of Montgomery County's economic turnaround, which and it's a county that is in need of a shot in the arm. Um, Elections are a funny thing. They don't always go our way. Voters of Montgomery County went in a different direction, and we'll have to see what happens. But I will say people like Andrew and Manny, and there were others, but they just stand out. They were really the key to our success. I mean, I cannot say enough. And people like John Gontram, who now oversees the Board of Public Works for the state of Maryland,
Mm-hmm.
people like that. Um, People like Tom Brennan, who serve as effectively as he does, serves so effectively as Brooks or Comptroller Learman's Board of Public Works liaison. These are all folks that we managed to bring into public service during our time, and the results speak for themselves.
I think very much so. I think one of the lessons for me is that tickets and campaigns and races should have some sort of balance to it. Um, and I'm hope I don't offend anybody when I say this, but when one black man is challenged by three white men for the same voters in the same county as we saw in Baltimore County. I mean, basically, we had three guys dividing the white vote. Normally, Baltimore County turns out 40 to 44% black. So
Right.
it's not the majority, but it's a big chunk. And now, if you take the um, the 66% of the vote, which is heavily white and a growing number of Asian, especially Muslim Asians. Um, we end up in a case where we've got three guys dividing the white vote, one guy taking the black vote. And that's oversimplifying it. And I don't mean to insult Julian when I say that, but um, I think we drop down to Montgomery County, and we've got two guys. Okay, we've got a black African progressive, and I mean not African American. I mean a guy from Africa, a very competent, capable guy, but he's a progressive and he's black, running against two guys dividing up the same demographic. Um, uh, Glass and Friedson are going after the same voters, are carving up the same pie. There's First of all, we don't have any bosses anymore who can call in two candidates and say, "Look, you guys will defeat each other. You can't,
Percent.
you can't do this." Um, they don't have the ability. I don't want to say they don't have the sense to do it, but they should have realized that the two guys running after the same same electorate is self-defeating. I don't think Friedson lost as much to Jawando as he defeated himself by dividing up the young technocratic Jewish vote. Um, it's just not inclined to work. I mean, now some people feel I'm oversimplifying that, but I think there's a certain element where um, this isn't a primary system where you could knock off this guy in the early primary and this guy in the middle primary and then survive to the end. This is a winner takes all election day, and the winner who took all was Will Jawando because he had a clear, sizable block and he won it and he delivered it and he did not divide um, his block with anybody else.
So I
Um,
want to go back to something you said about Baltimore County because I think you were onto something, Barry, as you often are. Baltimore County in its demographic evolution is not dissimilar to where Prince George's County was in the late 80s and the early 90s. Yeah, it was Baltimore County, like Prince George's back in another time, has traditionally been, perceived as a bastion of blue collar Democratic, Reagan Democratic votes, working class, industrial, combined with the other stations of the other stations of the Democratic cross, a burgeoning Jewish vote along the Reisterstown Road and Park Heights Avenue corridors, white progressives to the north of the city, kind of a demographic and conceptual extension of places like Roland Park and Mount Washington, and the black vote on the west side of the county. So what we're seeing now is the working class Reagan Democrats in Baltimore County, much like the American electorate as a whole, they're shifting from the Democratic to the Republican parties, largely on the basis of social issues. I would suggest that these working class blue collar issues in their in their uh, agreement with Trump on a whole host of cultural issues, they're actually subverting their economic best interests. So they are a declining political base for the Democratic Party. My extreme concern, both in Baltimore County and as a state and at the national level, is that this rising tide of anti-Semitism that we're seeing within the left flank of the Democratic Party with the growing influence of the Democratic Socialists of America and other assorted far left organizations and interests. It's going to drive the Jewish vote, drive the Jewish donor base from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. We're already starting to see it. This is something that's been going on now for several years. And I think that what we've seen in this past election cycle, where Jewish voters, Jewish donors have been harassed, shouted down, cursed at, threatened, intimidated, vilified, demonized. I think we're again, we are compressing our own demographic and our own geographic map. Um, but in Baltimore County, what that means is with the growing influx of black residents, black families, that voter base is becoming the prevalent voter bloc, and I think it's going to be a very long time before we see another somewhat a white county executive coming out of Baltimore County. The numbers no longer substantiate the idea. So I think Julian Jones almost becomes like a Wayne Curry in 1994, a harbinger, both a harbinger and a manifestation at once of that demographic shift.
I would agree with that. And I would also let me move in on something that you said because it's a real concern for me. Um, Early on in my political career, which was like, a million years ago, because I'm older than dirt, um, it comes out to I was told there's certain things you can't do in politics. Never speak out against Israel, never speak out against Social Security. Those were hard and fast rules of it didn't matter whether you were Republican or Democrat. You never went after Israel in a negative way. You never went after Social Security. And now both of them are on the table. Both of them get blasted regularly. But um, I was concerned to see a U.S. Senator come into the fifth congressional district race to replace Congressman Steny Hoyer talking about outside money, Jewish money, APAC money, these sorts of things, about the influences of big money. Chris Van Hollen has been in the game for 36 years and he built his stature by being a good speaker and a smart man and by being able to raise a lot of Jewish money. And so when Chris was with the congressional campaign, Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, he was going to the same people who supported Adrian. I mean, he went to the same people. He went to the same places. When he ran for U.S. Senate, he claims he was not APAC supported. Well, I was speaking to key Jewish donors and people who think nothing of dropping, large maximum checks on races. And the very definite reaction I got was yes, he may not have gotten a nickel from APAC, but he got his money from APAC aligned contributors. He went to the same people. He got the same money. He raised money in those places. He didn't say anything when the congressman in District 4 got some outside help. He didn't say anything when everybody's darling. And I know we love her now, but Sarah Elfreth, Sarah